The moment Dominico Vitali walked through that door, Giulia Moretti knew her life was about to shatter. She was sitting at his family's dinner table, holding his younger brother's hand, when their eyes met across the crowded room. It wasn't love at first sight. It was recognition. Like her soul had been searching for something it didn't know existed until that exact second. Electric, dangerous, inevitable, and completely impossible. Because she was dating Matteo. Sweet, charming Matteo who'd brought her here to meet his family. But it wasn't Matteo who made her heart stop beating. It was the wrong brother. Want to see where this dangerous attraction leads? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Giulia Moretti had always believed in signs. The universe whispered in small moments, a sudden breeze, a forgotten song on the radio, the way light fell through a window at exactly the right angle. As she stood outside the brownstone in Brooklyn's Carroll Gardens neighborhood, staring at the warm glow spilling from the windows, she wondered if the nervous flutter in her stomach was a warning she should have heeded. "You're going to love them," Matteo said, squeezing her hand. His smile was easy, confident, the same smile that had charmed her 3 months ago when he'd wandered into her yoga studio claiming he needed to find his center after a stressful week. She'd later learned that Matteo Vitali had never done yoga in his life. He'd simply seen her through the window and invented an excuse to meet her. It should have been a red flag. Instead, she'd found it endearing. "I'm nervous," Giulia admitted, smoothing down the simple black dress she'd changed into 3 times before settling on. "Big Italian family dinners are not exactly my comfort zone." Matteo laughed, pulling her closer. "Sweetheart, Sunday dinner at the Vitalises is like baptism by fire. You survive this, you can survive anything." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Besides, they're going to adore you. My mother's been asking about you for weeks." Giulia had grown up in silence. Her childhood had been punctuated by the soft click of her mother's knitting needles, the rustle of her father's newspaper, the occasional murmur of NPR from the kitchen radio. Dinner had been a quiet affair, just the 3 of them, eating carefully prepared meals while discussing books or current events in hushed, measured tones. Her parents, both college professors, had valued contemplation over conversation, reflection over reaction. The Vitali household, she was about to discover, was the complete opposite. The moment Matteo opened the door, sound crashed over her like a wave. Laughter, shouting, the clatter of dishes, children shrieking, someone singing off-key in what sounded like Italian, and underneath it all, the rich aroma of tomato sauce, garlic, and fresh bread. "Ma!" Matteo called out. "We're here." A small, round woman with silver-streaked dark hair appeared from what Giulia assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that read, "Kiss the cook or go hungry." Her face lit up when she saw Matteo, and she immediately pulled him into an embrace that seemed to engulf his entire 6-foot frame. "Matteo, finally! I was starting to think you got lost." She released him and immediately turned her attention to Giulia, her dark eyes warm but assessing. "And this must be Giulia. Come here, let me look at you." Before Giulia could respond, she was pulled into an equally enthusiastic hug. The woman smelled like basil and vanilla, and her embrace was so genuine that Giulia felt her nervousness ease slightly. "Mrs. Vitali, it's wonderful to meet you." "Mrs. Vitali." The woman stepped back, holding Giulia at arm's length. "Mrs. Vitali was my mother-in-law. May she rest in peace. You call me Rosa. Everyone calls me Rosa." She turned to Matteo with mock sternness. "She's too skinny. You're not feeding her?" "Ma, she owns a yoga studio. She's healthy." "Healthy? Nothing. She needs to eat. Come inside. Everyone's waiting." Giulia was ushered into a dining room that seemed to pulse with life. A long table dominated the space, already crowded with platters of antipasto, bowls of pasta, and bottles of wine. Around it sat what appeared to be at least 15 people, ranging from a tiny girl who couldn't have been more than 4 to an elderly man with a magnificent white mustache. "Everyone!" Rosa clapped her hands. "This is Giulia, Matteo's girlfriend." The room erupted in greetings. Giulia caught snippets. "Beautiful. Welcome. Sit. Is she hungry?" As hands reached out to shake hers, cheeks were offered for kisses, and names were thrown at her faster than she could possibly remember them. Matteo guided her to 2 empty seats, his hand steady on the small of her back. Don't try to remember everyone's names yet, he whispered. It took me 25 years and I'm still not sure who some of these people are. She laughed, grateful for his presence as the chaos swirled around them. A glass of wine appeared in her hand. Someone placed a plate in front of her, already loaded with food. The elderly man with the mustache, Uncle Carmine, she learned, launched into a story about his grocery store that somehow involved a celebrity chef and a misunderstanding about prosciutto. Julia found herself relaxing. The warmth was overwhelming but genuine. These people were loud, yes, but there was love in every raised voice, every interruption, every burst of laughter. Matteo's hand found hers under the table, and when she looked at him, he was smiling at her with such open affection that she felt a flutter of guilt for her earlier nervousness. This was good. This was real. This was... The front door opened. The change in the room was subtle but immediate. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. Rosa's head turned sharply toward the entrance. Uncle Carmine's story trailed off. Even the children seemed to quiet slightly. "That must be Domenico," Rosa said, her tone carefully neutral in a way that made Julia's instincts prickle with curiosity. Matteo's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on hers. "I didn't know he was coming." There was something in his voice, not quite tension, not quite resignation, something more complex that Julia didn't have time to analyze because footsteps were approaching, and then he was there. Dominico Vitali filled the doorway in a way that had nothing to do with physical size, though he was tall, taller than Matteo, broader through the shoulders, with a presence that seemed to compress the air around him. He wore a dark suit with no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone, and he moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always an option but rarely necessary. But it was his eyes that stopped Julia's breath. Dark, almost black, set under heavy brows, in a face that was harder than Matteo's, more angular, marked by a thin scar along his left jaw. Those eyes swept the room with practiced efficiency, cataloging, assessing, and then they landed on her. The world tilted. Julia had never believed in the concept of time stopping. It was a cliché, the kind of thing that happened in romance novels and movies, not in real life. But in that moment, as Domenico Vitali's gaze locked with hers, everything else faded to insignificance. The noise, the people, the warmth, it all became background static to the single, overwhelming awareness of him looking at her. Recognition slammed into her chest. Not the recognition of having met someone before, but something deeper, more primal. Like her body knew him, even though her mind had never encountered him until this exact second. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Just a fraction, barely noticeable, but she saw it. He felt it too. "Nico!" Rosa's voice broke the spell. "We didn't think you were coming." Domenico blinked, and whatever Julia had seen in his eyes shuddered behind careful control. "Got finished earlier than expected." His voice was deeper than Matteo's, rougher, with an edge that suggested he didn't use it often for pleasantries. He moved into the room, and Julia realized she'd been holding her breath. She forced herself to inhale slowly, to look away, to focus on the plate in front of her that she suddenly had no appetite for. "Come, sit." Rosa was already bustling, making space, moving plates. "You remember everyone. Oh, but you haven't met Julia. She's Matteo's girlfriend." Matteo's girlfriend. The words felt strange now, like a costume that didn't quite fit. Domenico's gaze returned to her, more controlled this time, but no less intense. "Julia." He didn't extend his hand, didn't smile. Just said her name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "This is my brother Domenico," Matteo said, his tone aggressively casual. "The family ghost shows up when you least expect it. Usually when there's good food," Uncle Carmine added, apparently recovered from whatever spell Domenico's arrival had cast. "Your mother made braciole." "I can smell it," Domenico said, but his eyes hadn't left Julia's face. "Nice to meet you." "You too," Julia managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The moment stretched too long. Someone cleared their throat. Matteo's hand tightened on hers again, and this time there was definite tension in it. Domenico finally looked away, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. The conversations resumed, the noise level rising back to its previous chaos. But Julia couldn't shake the feeling that everything had fundamentally changed. She forced herself to eat, to smile, to respond when spoken to. Matteo's cousin Angela asked about her yoga studio, and Julia heard herself explaining about the classes she taught, the community she'd built, the small sanctuary she'd created in the middle of the city. She sounded normal, engaged, like her entire nervous system wasn't hyper-aware of the man sitting 20 feet away who was doing an excellent job of pretending she didn't exist. Because he was pretending. She knew it with the same instinctive certainty that she'd felt when their eyes first met. He was deliberately not looking at her, not acknowledging her, engaging in conversation with his uncle about something to do with shipping routes, while his mother piled food onto his plate with the determination of someone trying to feed a famine victim. "Eat, eat," Rosa insisted. "You're too thin, you work too much." "I'm fine, Ma." "Fine," he says. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "Busy week." The exchange was clearly well-worn, a familiar rhythm between mother and son, but there was an edge to it that Julia picked up on. Rosa worried about Domenico in a way she didn't seem to worry about Matteo, like he was somehow more fragile, despite appearing to be carved from granite. "So Julia," Angela said, drawing her attention back, "how long have you and Matteo been together?" 3 months, Julia answered, aware that Domenico's shoulders had tensed slightly at the question. "We met at my studio." "He walked in off the street," Matteo added with a grin, apparently oblivious to the undercurrent of tension Julia could feel vibrating through the room. "Saw her through the window and invented an excuse to meet her." Several people laughed. "That's our Matteo," someone said. "Always knows what he wants." "And always gets it," Angela added with a wink. Julia smiled because it was expected, but her chest felt tight. Across the table, Domenico had gone very still. He was cutting his meat with precise, controlled movements, his face a mask of indifference, but his knuckles were white on the knife handle. The meal continued. Plates were cleared and replaced with new ones. Wine flowed freely. Someone told a story that ended with half the table arguing about whether it had happened in 1987 or 1988. Children were sent to wash their hands. The elderly aunts debated the correct ratio of ricotta to eggs in a proper cannoli filling. Through it all, Julia felt Domenico's presence like a magnetic pull she couldn't ignore. Every time he moved, she was aware of it. When he spoke, her ears tuned to his voice automatically, filtering it out from the cacophony of the room. And on the 3 occasions when their eyes met accidentally, the jolt of connection was so powerful, she nearly gasped. This was insane. She was sitting next to Matteo, sweet Matteo, who'd spent 3 months making her laugh, taking her to quiet dinners, holding her hand through movies, kissing her with gentle enthusiasm that promised more when she was ready. Matteo, who was looking at her now with such open affection that guilt twisted in her stomach like a knife. "You okay?" he murmured, leaning close. "I know this is a lot." "I'm fine," she lied. "Your family is wonderful. They like you, I can tell." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Ma's already planning our wedding, probably." "Matteo," she hissed, but she was smiling because he was clearly joking. "I'm serious. She's been asking me when I'm going to settle down since I turned 25. Now I show up with a beautiful, successful woman who owns her own business? She's picking out China patterns in her head." Julia laughed, but the sound felt hollow. At the other end of the table, Domenico pushed back his chair with more force than necessary. "Leaving already?" Rosa asked, her tone disappointed but not surprised. "Yeah, early meeting tomorrow." "On Monday? What kind of business has meetings at—" "The kind I'm in, Ma." His voice was gentle but firm. "Dinner was great. Thanks." He made his rounds, kissing his mother's cheek, clasping his uncle's shoulder, nodding to various cousins and aunts. He was methodical about it, thorough, making sure to acknowledge everyone. Everyone except Julia and Matteo. He was almost to the door when Rosa called out, "Nico, you didn't say goodbye to Julia." Julia's heart stopped. Domenico paused mid-step, his back to the table, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. Slowly, he turned. Their eyes met again, and this time there was no mistaking what passed between them. Want. Recognition. Impossibility. "Welcome to the family," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Then his gaze shifted to Matteo. "Take care of her." It wasn't a friendly suggestion. It was an order, delivered with the kind of authority that made it clear Domenico Vitali was used to being obeyed. Matteo's arms slid around Julia's shoulders, possessive in a way he'd never been before. Always. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken tension, and then Domenico nodded once and walked out. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow echoed louder than all the noise that had come before. The conversation resumed immediately, the family flowing back into their natural rhythm as if nothing had happened. But Giulia sat frozen, Matteo's arm around her, the taste of wine turning sour in her mouth, and wondered what the hell had just happened. "Don't mind Nico," Rosa said, appearing at her elbow to refill her wine glass. "He's always been the serious one. Even as a boy, always carrying the weight of the world." She patted Giulia's hand. "He'll warm up to you. Give him time." Giulia nodded mutely, not trusting herself to speak, because she didn't want Domenico to warm up to her. She wanted... No, she couldn't even finish that thought. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Giulia smiled and laughed in all the right places, accepted second helpings she didn't want, exchanged phone numbers with Angela, who insisted they should get coffee sometime. When Matteo finally announced they should go, citing her early Monday morning classes, she nearly sagged with relief. The goodbyes took another 20 minutes. Rosa hugged her 3 times, made her promise to come back soon, and sent her home with enough leftover food to feed an army. Uncle Carmine kissed both her cheeks and told her she was good for Matteo. Angela whispered that she was already one of them. "See," Matteo said as they finally escaped into the cool night air, "I told you they'd love you." Giulia let him pull her close as they walked to his car, her mind spinning. The rational part of her brain, the part that had been carefully cultivated through years of yoga practice and meditation, knew this was ridiculous. She'd experienced a moment of intense attraction to a stranger. It happened. It didn't mean anything. It was probably just nerves about meeting Matteo's family, her anxiety manifesting in a weird, misplaced way. But the rest of her, the part that trusted intuition and signs and the way the universe whispered, knew better. That hadn't been simple attraction. That had been recognition. And from the way Domenico had looked at her, from the tension in his shoulders and the careful control in his voice, he'd felt it too. "Thank you for doing this," Matteo said as he drove her home through the quiet Brooklyn streets. "I know my family can be overwhelming, but it means a lot to me that you came." "They're wonderful," Giulia said automatically. "Really warm." "Yeah, they're great." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Domenico's not usually there. He's busy. He doesn't make it to Sunday dinner often." There was something in his tone that made Giulia turn to look at him. "You and your brother don't get along?" Matteo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "It's not that simple. Nico's complicated. He's always been the responsible one, the one who took care of everything after Dad died. I was only 12. Nico was 19 and he just stepped up. Took over the family business, made sure we were all okay, put me through college." He paused. "But there's a distance there now, like he's carrying something he won't share." Giulia wanted to ask more, but something held her back. Instead, she reached over and squeezed Matteo's hand. "You're lucky to have each other." "Yeah." But he didn't sound convinced. When they reached her apartment in Park Slope, Matteo walked her to the door like he always did. He kissed her softly, sweetly, and for a moment Giulia tried to lose herself in it, to feel what she should feel, to recapture the easy chemistry they'd shared before tonight. But all she could think about was dark eyes and impossible recognition. "I'll call you tomorrow," Matteo promised. "Maybe we can grab dinner?" "Sounds good." She watched him drive away before climbing the stairs to her second-floor apartment. The space greeted her with its familiar calm, the soft gray walls, the plants clustered by the windows, the meditation cushions arranged in the corner. This was her sanctuary, carefully constructed over years of learning to create peace in a chaotic world. Tonight, it felt like a cage. Giulia changed into pajamas mechanically, going through her nighttime routine on autopilot. But when she finally lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, sleep was impossible. She kept seeing him, the way he'd stood in that doorway, commanding attention without saying a word, the intensity in his eyes when they met hers, the careful control in his voice when he'd said her name. "Welcome to the family. Take care of her." Those weren't the words of a man experiencing simple attraction. Those were the words of a man who'd already claimed something he had no right to claim. And the terrifying part was that somewhere deep in her chest, in a place beyond reason or logic, Giulia felt like she belonged to him too. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Matteo. "Thanks again for tonight. You were perfect. Sleep well." Julia stared at the message, guilt churning in her stomach. She typed back, "Thank you for including me. Good night." But sleep didn't come. Instead, she lay awake in the darkness, wondering what she'd stepped into, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing, wondering why the universe had whispered this particular warning when she'd been too distracted to listen. And in a penthouse apartment across the city, Dominico Vitali stood at his window, looking out at the glittering lights of Manhattan, a glass of bourbon in his hand and the image of green eyes burned into his memory. Some things he'd learned in his 32 years were inevitable. Some things were impossible. And some things, some dangerous, beautiful things, were both at once. He'd spent the last 6 hours since leaving his mother's house trying to convince himself that what he'd felt was nothing, a flash of attraction, easily ignored. She was his brother's girlfriend. That made her untouchable, simple. Except nothing about Giulia Moretti was simple. The way she'd looked at him, like she'd been waiting her whole life to see him. Like she'd recognized something in him that he'd kept carefully hidden from everyone else. Domenico had built his life on control. Control over his emotions, his reactions, his world. He'd taken over his father's business at 19 and transformed it into something that could sustain his entire family. He'd made hard choices, impossible choices, choices that had cost him pieces of himself he'd never get back. And he'd done it all while maintaining absolute control. Until tonight. Until green eyes and a quiet smile and the overwhelming sense that his carefully ordered world had just been turned completely upside down. He downed the rest of his bourbon, set the glass aside, and made himself a promise. He would stay away. Giulia was Matteo's. His little brother, who'd never had to make the hard choices, who got to live a normal life because Domenico had sacrificed his own. Matteo deserved happiness. Matteo deserved a woman who looked at him the way Giulia should. Domenico would stay away. It was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. But as he finally climbed into bed, as he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, he knew with absolute certainty that staying away from Giulia Moretti was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. And in this life, Domenico Vitali had done a lot of hard things. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Because just as Giulia had spent 3 months building something safe and comfortable with Matteo, just as she'd started to believe in the possibility of a normal relationship with a good man, fate had walked through a door and looked at her with eyes that promised nothing would ever be simple again. The dinner had changed everything, and despite every rational thought, every logical reason why this was wrong, why this couldn't happen, why this was impossible, Giulia couldn't shake the feeling that it was also inevitable. 3 days passed before Giulia heard from him. 3 days of teaching her morning yoga classes, smiling at students, adjusting poses, breathing through the anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in her chest. 3 days of dinner with Matteo, of his hand in hers, of trying desperately to feel what she should feel. 3 days of lying awake at night, staring at her ceiling, wondering if she'd imagined the entire thing. Then her phone buzzed during Tuesday afternoon's restorative yoga class. Unknown number. "We need to talk. Domenico." Giulia's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Around her, 6 students lay in savasana, eyes closed, breathing deeply. She should have been guiding them through the final relaxation, her voice calm and centered. Instead, she stood frozen in the middle of her studio, staring at 10 words that confirmed she hadn't imagined anything. She waited until class ended, until her students had rolled up their mats and filtered out with quiet thanks and promises to return Thursday. Only when the studio was empty did she let herself look at the message again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The right thing to do was delete it. Block the number. Tell Matteo. The right thing was obvious. She typed back, "About what?" The response came immediately, like he'd been waiting. "You know what?" Giulia's heart hammered against her ribs. She should stop this, right now, before it went any further. "This isn't appropriate," she typed. "I know. I'm with Matteo. I know that too." "Then why are you texting me?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When his response finally came, it was just an address in Lower Manhattan and a time, 7 p.m. tonight. Giulia stared at the message for a full minute. Every rational part of her brain screamed that going would be a mistake, a betrayal, the beginning of something that would hurt everyone involved, but her fingers were already typing, I'll be there. The address led to a small wine bar tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. The kind of place that didn't advertise, that you'd only know about if someone told you. Julia arrived 15 minutes late deliberately, hoping the delay would somehow make this feel less like she was rushing to meet him. Domenico sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, positioned so he could see the entire room. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his shoulders look even broader. When she walked in, his eyes found her immediately, and that same electric recognition jolted through her system. "You came," he said as she approached. "I shouldn't have." Julia remained standing, gripping her purse like a shield. "I don't even know why I'm here." "Yes, you do." His voice was low, meant only for her. "Sit down, Julia." She should leave, should turn around and walk out and never look back. Instead, she sat. Domenico had already ordered wine, a Barolo, deep red and rich. He poured her a glass with steady hands that somehow made her own trembling more obvious. "How did you get my number?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He took a drink, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "My mother gave it to me. She's been trying to get me to be friendlier to Matteo's girlfriend. Thinks I was rude at dinner." "You were rude at dinner." "I know." He set down his glass. "I was trying not to stare at you for 4 straight hours. Rude was easier." The honesty of it stole her breath. "Domenico." "Dom," he interrupted. "My family calls me Nico, but I hate it. Close friends call me Dom." "We're not friends." "No," he agreed. "We're not." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Around them, other patrons talked and laughed, oblivious to the tension crackling at the corner table. "I can't stop thinking about you," Domenico finally said, his voice rough. "Since Sunday, every thought leads back to you. Your eyes, the way you smiled at something my uncle said, how you touched Matteo's hand." His jaw tightened on the last part. "I've tried. I've worked 20-hour days trying. It's not helping." Julia's wine glass was suddenly very interesting. "You're his brother." "I'm aware. He's good to me. He's kind and funny and you don't love him." It wasn't a question. Her head snapped up. "You don't know that." "I do." Domenico leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. "Because if you loved him, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have felt what you felt when we looked at each other. You wouldn't have texted me back." "One dinner," Julia said, her voice shaking. "We shared one look across a dinner table. That doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't it?" He reached across the table, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel the heat of his hand near hers. "Tell me you haven't thought about me. Tell me you sleep fine at night, that you don't wonder what would happen if you'd met me first. Tell me I imagined the whole thing, and I'll walk out of here right now." Julia opened her mouth to say exactly that, to lie convincingly enough that he'd leave, and she could go back to her safe, simple life with Matteo. But the words wouldn't come. "I thought so," Domenico said quietly, pulling his hand back. "This is impossible." Julia's voice broke on the word. "Even if I felt something, and I'm not saying I do, you're his brother, his family. There's no version of this that doesn't destroy everything." You think I don't know that?" Domenico's control cracked slightly, frustration bleeding through. "You think I haven't run through every scenario in my head? I've spent 6 years building walls between myself and everyone else. 6 years choosing duty over everything personal, and then you walked into my mother's dining room, and every wall I've built—" He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. "This isn't who I am. I don't chase my brother's girlfriends. I don't chase anyone." "Then don't," Julia whispered. "Let this go. Pretend we never met. I'll keep dating Matteo, and eventually this feeling will fade. And will it?" Domenico's eyes burned into hers. "Because I've never felt anything fade that started this strong." The truth of his words settled between them like a living thing. Julia thought about the past 3 days, about forcing herself to be present with Matteo while half her mind was always somewhere else, wondering where Domenico was, what he was doing, if he was thinking about her too. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I don't know." For the first time, Domenico looked uncertain. "I just knew I couldn't stay away from you. Maybe I needed to see you again, to to prove to myself that Sunday was a fluke, that you're just a woman and this is just attraction, and it'll burn out if we just talk like normal people. And? Julia held her breath. Did it work? Domenico's laugh was dark, humorless. No, it's worse now. Now I know how your voice sounds when you're nervous, how you twist that ring on your right hand when you're thinking, how you bite your bottom lip when you're trying not to say something. His eyes dropped to her mouth. It's so much worse now. Julia's phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't need to check to know it was Matteo. He'd texted her twice already today. Sweet messages about looking forward to seeing her later this week. Messages from a good man who didn't deserve any of this. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Domenico agreed. You should. Neither of them stood. Tell me about your family, Julia said instead, desperately searching for something to fill the charged silence. About what Matteo meant when he said you took over after your father died. Domenico's expression shuddered. That's not a first date conversation. This isn't a date, isn't it? He refilled both their glasses. Fine. You want the family history? My father ran an import-export business. Shipping, mostly. Some warehousing. When I was 19, he had a heart attack and died. Someone needed to step up. I was the oldest, so it was me. That's a lot of responsibility for a 19-year-old. It was necessary. His tone made it clear the subject was closed, but Julia pressed anyway. What about college? Your own plans? Didn't have any. My plans became keeping the family afloat. Domenico studied his wine. Matteo got to go to NYU, got to study business, got to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. That was enough. But what did you want? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if she really wanted to know. Doesn't matter what I wanted. Matters what needed to happen. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Domenico's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. I need to go. Work. At 8 p.m.? My work doesn't keep office hours. He stood pulling out his wallet. Julia noticed the way the other patrons tracked his movement, the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere when he rose. Whatever Dominico Vitali did for a living, it commanded respect. Or fear. I'll walk you out, he said. Outside, the November air was sharp and cold. Julia wrapped her coat tighter, very aware of Domenico standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. Thank you for the wine, she said formally, like they were business acquaintances instead of two people fighting an attraction that was becoming harder to deny. Julia. The way he said her name made her look up. His dark eyes were intense, searching. I meant what I said. I've never felt anything like this. And I've tried. I'm still trying to do the right thing. But you need to know that every time I see Matteo with you, every time he talks about you. He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. This isn't going away. It has to, Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Does it? Domenico took a step closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Or do we just keep lying to ourselves until something breaks? Nothing's going to break, because nothing's going to happen. Julia forced steel into her voice. I'm with Matteo. You're his brother. That's the end of the story. If you really believed that, you wouldn't have come tonight. He was right, and they both knew it. Julia took a step back, putting necessary distance between them before she did something stupid. Don't contact me again, she said. Please, this can't happen, and every time we see each other, it gets harder to remember why. Domenico nodded slowly. Okay, if that's what you want. It's what needs to happen. Not the same thing. But he was already backing away, his expression unreadable. Take care of yourself, Julia. She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the Manhattan night, and felt like she was letting something essential slip through her fingers, which was insane. She barely knew him. One dinner, one glass of wine, that wasn't enough to build anything on. But it was enough to destroy everything. Julia made it halfway home before the tears started. Not dramatic, movie-style crying, just silent tears that she wiped away angrily at red lights. She was being ridiculous, melodramatic. She had a good man who cared about her, who wanted to build something real. What she felt for Domenico was just chemistry, just attraction. It would fade. It had to fade. Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking spot. Matteo's name lit up the screen. "Hey," she answered, forcing brightness into her voice. "Hey yourself. How was your day?" He sounded happy, relaxed. "Good. Taught 3 classes, finally got that new student to nail crow pose. That's my girl. Listen, I was thinking, this weekend, maybe we could drive upstate. There's this inn in the Hudson Valley my mom recommended. Supposed to have amazing views, great food. We could use a break from the city. A romantic weekend away. Just the 2 of them. It should have sounded perfect." "That sounds nice," Julia said. "You don't sound sure." "No, I am. It sounds really nice. I'm just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." Concern colored his voice. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just busy season at the studio. You know how it is before the holidays." "Well, this weekend will be good for you then. Help you relax." He paused. "Hey, weird thing. My brother asked about you." Julia's heart stopped. "What?" "Yeah, Nico called earlier, asked how things were going with us. It was strange. He never asks about my personal life." "What did you tell him?" "That things are great, that I'm really happy." Matteo's voice softened. "I am, happy. With you." The words should have filled her with warmth. Instead, they felt like stones settling in her chest. "I'm happy too," she lied. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important before saying goodnight. Julia sat in her car afterward, in the dark, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated so quickly. Her phone buzzed with a text. For one wild moment, she thought it might be Dominico, but it was just Angela, Matteo's cousin. "Coffee tomorrow? Would love to get to know my future cousin-in-law better." Future cousin-in-law. The words made Julia feel sick. She texted back a polite acceptance, then finally dragged herself upstairs to her apartment. The space felt emptier than usual, her carefully cultivated peace disrupted by thoughts she couldn't quiet. Julia changed, washed her face, went through all her nighttime rituals. But when she finally lay in bed, she couldn't stop replaying the evening, the way Domenico had looked at her across the table, his honesty about what he felt. The intensity in his eyes when he'd said it wasn't going away. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that she believed him, because she felt it too. This pull, this recognition, this sense that meeting him had fundamentally altered something in her universe. It didn't make sense. It wasn't rational. It completely violated every principle she'd built her life on. But it was real. Julia rolled over, punching her pillow in frustration. She would not do this. She would not be the woman who destroyed a relationship, a family, over some inexplicable attraction. She was stronger than that. More disciplined. She taught yoga, for heaven's sake. Control and mindfulness were literally her job. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. Against every bit of better judgment, Julia grabbed it. Unknown number. "I know I said I wouldn't contact you. I lied. I can't stop thinking about you. Dom." She should delete it, should block the number, should do any number of responsible, mature things. Instead, she saved his contact and typed back, "I can't stop thinking about you either." The response was immediate. "This is a bad idea." "I know. Matteo doesn't deserve this." "I know. So what do we do?" Julia stared at the question for a long time. What did they do? There was no good answer, no path forward that didn't hurt people she cared about. But there was also no putting this back in the box, no pretending the connection didn't exist. "I don't know," she finally typed, "but I don't think I can stay away from you." "Good," came the reply, "because I was running out of ways to pretend I could stay away from you." They texted until 2 in the morning. Nothing important, nothing particularly profound. Domenico told her about his ridiculous Uncle Carmine's latest scheme to expand his grocery store. Julia described her most challenging student, a CEO, who couldn't quiet his mind long enough to hold a pose. They talked about books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, childhood memories that shaped them. And with every message, Julia felt herself falling deeper into something she couldn't name and couldn't stop. When she finally put down her phone, the sun was starting to lighten the sky outside her window. She had to teach a class in 4 hours. She should be exhausted. Instead, she felt more awake than she had in years. Domenico sat in his penthouse office, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and pink, his phone still warm from hours of typing. He should be preparing for his 9 a.m. meeting with the Castellano family. should be reviewing contracts, checking shipping manifests, making sure every detail of his very complicated, very dangerous business was in order. Instead, he was thinking about the way Julia described the first time she'd realized teaching yoga was her calling. The lightness in her words when she talked about helping people find peace in their bodies. The passion that came through even in text messages. He'd built his entire adult life on control and distance, on making hard choices and living with the consequences, on protecting his family by becoming someone most people were too smart to cross. And then Julia Moretti had walked into his life and made him want something he had no right to want. His phone buzzed. A message from his lieutenant, Marco. Castellano meeting confirmed, 9 a.m. They're bringing 3 men. Domenico typed back a quick acknowledgement, then looked at his conversation with Julia. Their messages filled the screen, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with what was said and everything to do with what wasn't. This would hurt Matteo, would probably fracture his family, would definitely complicate the carefully balanced life Domenico had constructed where personal feelings came second to duty and responsibility. But as he watched the sun rise over the city, as he thought about Julia's last message, same time tomorrow night, Domenico knew he was already past the point of walking away. Some forces, once set in motion, couldn't be stopped, and whatever was happening between him and Julia Moretti. That force had been set in motion the moment their eyes met across his mother's dining room table. The only question now was how much damage it would do before it burned itself out, or if it would burn them all down instead. 2 weeks of secret messages turned into 3. 3 weeks became a month. And with every passing day, Julia felt herself being pulled deeper into something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. They never planned to meet again after that first night at the wine bar, but somehow it kept happening. A coffee shop in the West Village where no one from the Vitali family would think to look. A quiet walk through Central Park at dusk when the November cold kept most people indoors. Brief, stolen moments that felt simultaneously innocent and like the worst betrayal imaginable. This has to stop, Julia said for the dozenth time, sitting across from Domenico in a corner booth at a diner in Queens, far enough from Brooklyn that running into anyone they knew was unlikely. I know, Domenico replied, also for the dozenth time. But his hand was on the table, close enough to hers that she could feel the heat of his skin, and neither of them moved away. It was early December now, and outside the diner window, the first real snow of the season was starting to fall. Julia watched the flakes drift past streetlights, trying not to think about the fact that she was supposed to be at Matteo's apartment right now, helping him decorate his Christmas tree. She'd texted him an excuse about a pipe bursting at the studio. Another lie in a growing collection of them. The guilt was starting to suffocate her, but not enough to make her leave. How's the weekend trip? Domenico asked, his voice carefully neutral. But his jaw was tight, and Julia knew the question cost him. I canceled it. She'd done it 3 weeks ago, claiming work stress. Matteo had been disappointed but understanding, which somehow made it worse. I couldn't go. Not when... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Not when you're here with me instead. Domenico's dark eyes held hers. We're terrible people. Yes. Matteo called me yesterday. Said he's worried about you, that you've been distant. Domenico's hand clenched into a fist. He asked me if I noticed anything wrong at Sunday dinner last month, if I thought you seemed uncomfortable. Julia's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? That I barely spoke to you. That I wouldn't know. His voice was rough with self-loathing. I lied to my brother about you, added it to the list of things I'm lying to him about. We haven't done anything, Julia said, but even she didn't believe it. Maybe they hadn't crossed certain physical lines, but emotionally, they'd crossed every line that mattered. Haven't we? Domenico leaned forward. Tell me something, Julia. When you're with him, are you thinking about him, or are you thinking about our next conversation? About when you'll see me again? She couldn't answer that, couldn't admit out loud what they both already knew. That's what I thought. Domenico sat back, running a hand through his hair. This is killing me. Every time he talks about you, every time he smiles because you texted him back, every time he tells me how happy he is, he stopped, his control fracturing. I'm watching my brother fall in love with a woman who's sitting across from me in a diner in Queens, lying to be here. Don't. Julia's voice broke. Don't make me the villain. You're not the villain, neither am I. We're just two people who... He stopped himself, seemed to reconsider. What are we doing, Julia? Really? I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. I should end things with Matteo. I know I should, but how do I do that without telling him why? How do I break his heart without him knowing it's because of you? You can't, Domenico said flatly. There's no version of this where everyone walks away okay. Then what do we do? Before Domenico could answer, Giulia's phone lit up with an incoming call. Matteo's name flashed on the screen, and guilt crashed over her like a wave. Answer it, Domenico said, his voice tight. He's probably worried. Giulia stared at the phone, then at Domenico, then back at the phone. She let it ring until it went to voicemail. I can't talk to him right now, she whispered. Not while I'm sitting here with you. He'll hear it in my voice. Then you need to leave. But Domenico didn't move, didn't look away. Go home, Giulia. Call him back. Be with him. Stop doing this. Is that what you want? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Domenico's eyes searched her face, and in them she saw the same war she felt inside herself. Duty versus desire. Logic versus feeling. The right thing versus the thing that felt inevitable. What I want, he said slowly, is to take you out of this diner, drive you to my apartment, and spend the next 12 hours learning every single thing about you. I want to hear about every moment that shaped you. I want to know what you dream about, what scares you, what makes you laugh at 3 a.m. I want... He stopped, his voice rough. I want things I have no right to want. Giulia couldn't breathe. The air in the diner felt too thick, too charged. Around them, other customers ate their meals, oblivious to the fact that her entire world was cracking open. But what I need, Domenico continued, is for you to choose, not me, not Matteo. Choose what you actually want. Because this middle ground we're living in, it's not fair to anyone, least of all you. You're asking me to make an impossible choice. I'm asking you to make the choice you've already made. His voice was gentle but firm. You're not in love with Matteo. Maybe you want to be. Maybe you're trying to be. But you're not. And the longer this goes on, the more it's going to hurt him when the truth comes out. And what is the truth? Giulia's voice rose slightly, drawing a glance from the waitress. She lowered it, leaning across the table. That I met his brother and felt something I've never felt before? That I can't stop thinking about a man I barely know? That every rational part of my brain says this is wrong, but somehow it feels more right than anything I've done in years? Yes, Domenico said simply. That's exactly the truth. Giulia's phone buzzed with a text. She looked down to see Matteo's message. Everything okay? Miss you. Can I come over later? The words blurred as tears finally spilled over. She'd been so careful, so controlled, teaching her classes and maintaining her routines and pretending everything was fine. But sitting here, confronted with the reality of what she was doing, the facade crumbled. I don't want to hurt him, she said, her voice breaking. He's good, Dom. He's so good, and he doesn't deserve any of this. No, he doesn't. Domenico reached across the table and, for the first time, actually took her hand. The contact was electric, his fingers warm and strong as they wrapped around hers. Which is why you need to make a choice. Tonight. Giulia looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb traced circles on her palm, at the physical proof that this wasn't just in her head. Then she looked up at his face, at the intensity in his dark eyes, at the man who'd somehow become the center of her universe in the space of a month. If I choose you, she whispered, if I end things with Matteo and tell him the truth, what happens then? You and I start dating while your family watches? While your mother serves us dinner knowing I left one son for another? While Matteo has to see us together? Domenico's jaw tightened. I don't know. But I know lying is worse. Sneaking around is worse. Watching you pretend to be happy with him while texting me goodnight is worse. You really think we could survive that? The judgment, the anger, the damage to your family? I think, Domenico said carefully, that I've spent the last 13 years doing everything for my family. Taking over the business at 19, making choices I didn't want to make, becoming someone I never planned to be. All to keep them safe, keep them stable, keep them whole. He paused, his eyes burning into hers. And I'd do it all again. But for once, just once, I want something for myself. Even if it's complicated, even if it's hard. The raw honesty in his voice undid something in Julia's chest. She'd been so focused on the impossibility of the situation that she hadn't fully considered what Domenico was willing to risk. His relationship with his brother, his position in his family, the careful control he maintained over every aspect of his life. For her. I need to talk to him, Julia said finally. Tonight. I can't keep doing this. Domenico nodded, but she saw relief flash across his face before he locked it down. What are you going to tell him? The truth. That I care about him, but I can't be with him. That my feelings have changed. She took a shaky breath. I won't tell him about us. Not yet. Not until I've had time to He'll know anyway. Domenico's thumb stilled on her palm. The moment you tell him it's over, he's going to put the pieces together. My disappearance from Sunday dinners. The way we avoided each other that first night. He's not stupid, Julia. Then what do I say? You tell him you're sorry. You tell him he deserves someone who's all in, and you let him be angry. Domenico's voice was heavy with certainty, because he will be, at you, at me, at the situation, and he has every right. Julia pulled her hand away, instantly missing the warmth. Your family is going to hate me. Maybe at first. Domenico's expression was unreadable. But they'll forgive you before they forgive me. I'm the older brother. I should have known better, should have stayed away. His mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. They're not wrong. You're not the only one responsible for this. Aren't I? I pursued you, Julia, texted you first, asked you to meet me. I could have left you alone, let you build something with Matteo. Instead, He stopped, shaking his head. I couldn't. From the moment I saw you, I couldn't. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Julia felt the weight of it settle into her bones. This wasn't just attraction, wasn't just chemistry. This was recognition on a level she didn't fully understand, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. I should go, she said, though she didn't move. Before I lose my nerve. Julia, Domenico's voice stopped her as she reached for her coat. Whatever happens tonight, whatever Matteo says, whatever your relationship with my family becomes, I want you to know something. She waited, her heart hammering. I don't regret this. Any of it. His dark eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. Even if you walk out of here and decide this is too complicated, too hard, too impossible, I won't regret meeting you, knowing you, these stolen hours. Julia felt tears threatening again. Dom, let me finish. He stood, moving around the table until he was standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You walked into my life and reminded me that I'm still capable of wanting something beyond duty and responsibility. That's a gift, Julia. Whatever comes next, remember that. Then, before she could respond, before she could think, Domenico leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was chaste, almost brotherly, but the contact sent electricity shooting through her entire body. She felt his breath against her skin, felt the tension in his frame as he held himself rigidly still. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. Go, he said, his voice rough. Before I do something we'll both regret. Julia grabbed her coat and purse with shaking hands. At the door of the diner, she looked back. Domenico stood exactly where she'd left him, his hands clenched at his sides, watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. Then she pushed through the door into the cold December night and didn't look back again. The drive to Matteo's apartment in Brooklyn Heights took 30 minutes through light snow. Julia spent every second of it rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd say it, trying to find words that would hurt less. There weren't any. Matteo answered on the second knock, his face lighting up when he saw her. Hey, I thought you had to stay at the studio. The pipe thing got resolved faster than expected. Another lie, smooth and practiced. She was getting too good at this. Can I come in? Of course. He stepped aside and Julia entered the apartment she'd been to dozens of times before. It was quintessentially Matteo, Comfortable furniture, sports memorabilia on the walls, a kitchen that was always stocked with good wine and takeout menus. Easy, uncomplicated, everything she was about to destroy. I made coffee, Matteo said, heading toward the kitchen. Or I could open wine if you want. You look like you could use... He stopped, really looking at her for the first time. Jules, what's wrong? She must look as wrecked as she felt. Julia took a steadying breath. We need to talk. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Matteo's expression shifted from concern to something harder, more guarded. He'd heard that tone before. Everyone had. Okay, he said slowly, setting down the coffee mug he'd been holding. Talk. Julia had planned a speech, gentle words, careful explanations, but standing there, seeing the way Matteo's shoulders had already tensed in anticipation of pain, she found she couldn't deliver practiced lines. I can't do this anymore, she said simply. I'm sorry. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Can't or don't want to? Both. Neither. Julia's hands twisted together. Matteo, you're wonderful. You're kind and funny, and you've been so good to me, but I can't. I'm not... The words tangled in her throat. You're not in love with me, Matteo finished, his voice flat. That's what you're trying to say. I wanted to be. It was the truth, even if it was inadequate. I really did. But wanting isn't the same as being. How long have you known? There was an edge to his voice now, hurt beginning to bleed through the shock. How long have you been pretending? Julia couldn't answer that, couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when she'd realized her feelings for Matteo would never develop beyond fondness. Was it before Dominico? Or had meeting him simply forced her to acknowledge what was already true? That's what I thought. Matteo's laugh was bitter. You know what the worst part is? I knew. Some part of me knew you were pulling away. I just kept telling myself I was imagining it. That if I was patient enough, attentive enough, you'd eventually feel the same way I do. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so achingly familiar that Julia's guilt intensified. You did hurt me, Jules. You let me fall in love with you while you were figuring out your feelings. I didn't know, Julia said, her voice breaking. I thought maybe with time... With time what? You'd convince yourself to love me? Matteo's voice rose slightly. That's not how it works. Either you feel it or you don't. I know, you're right. I should have ended this sooner. I should have been honest with myself, with you. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't really help right now. Matteo turned away, his hands gripping the back of his couch. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more controlled. Is there someone else? Julia's heart stopped. What? You heard me. He turned back and his eyes were too knowing, too sharp. Is there someone else? She should lie. Should protect Dominico, protect herself, protect what little was left of this situation. But she'd already lied so much, and Matteo deserved at least this small piece of truth. I don't know how to answer that, she said carefully. That's an answer. Matteo's jaw clenched. Who is he? It doesn't matter. This isn't about... Who is he, Julia? His voice was hard now, demanding. Do I know him? The question was a trap. Any answer would lead him to the truth. Julia's silence stretched too long, and she saw the moment understanding dawned on Matteo's face. His expression shifted from hurt to something darker, more complicated. No, he said, but it was more plea than statement. Tell me it's not... Matteo... My brother? The words exploded out of him. You're leaving me for my brother? I'm not leaving you for anyone, Julia said, but even she knew how hollow it sounded. I'm ending this because it's not fair to you, because you deserve someone who... Don't. Matteo held up a hand, his face white with shock and anger. Don't stand there and tell me what I deserve. Not when you've been... What? Meeting him? Talking to him? While I was planning our future? It's not like that. Then what is it like? He moved toward her, and Julia had to fight the instinct to step back. Explain to me how this happened, because a month ago, everything was fine. We were fine. And now you're ending things and can't quite deny that it has something to do with Nico. Julia felt tears sliding down her face. I didn't plan this. I didn't want this. When I met your family, when I met him, I wasn't looking for... She stopped, not sure how to finish. For what? Matteo's voice was dangerously quiet. For something better? For something more exciting? My brother's always been the dramatic one, the intense one. Is that what you wanted? Something more complicated than what I could give you? No, that's not. Julia struggled to find words. I can't explain it, Matteo. I know how it sounds. I know how it looks. But I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Has anything happened? Physically? The question was brutal in its directness. No, Julia said honestly. We haven't. Nothing like that. Just emotionally. Matteo's laugh was harsh. Just you falling for him while I was falling for you. That's so much better. I'm sorry, Julia whispered, because there was nothing else to say. I'm so sorry. Matteo was quiet for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. When he spoke again, his voice was devastatingly calm. I saw it that first night, at Sunday dinner, the way you looked at each other. He met her eyes, and the pain there was almost unbearable. I told myself I was paranoid, that it was just my usual jealousy of Nico coming out. But I saw it, Julia. I knew the second he walked through that door that something had shifted. Julia couldn't respond, couldn't deny what they'd both felt. Did he pursue you? Matteo asked. Or did you go to him? Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Because I need to know if my brother actively tried to steal my girlfriend, or if you just found him more appealing. The cruelty in the question was earned, but it still stung. He didn't steal me. I'm not a possession. I made my own choices, and I take responsibility for them. That's not an answer. He texted me first, Julia admitted, watching Matteo flinch. But I could have ignored it, could have told you immediately. I didn't. That's on me. How long? The question was barely above a whisper. How long have you two been talking? A month, just talking, coffee a few times, nothing. A month. Matteo's composure cracked completely. A month you've been lying to me, canceling plans, being distant, and all the while you were what? Building something with my brother behind my back? I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. His voice rose, pain and anger finally breaking through. You did hurt me, Julia. You and Nico both. My brother, who I've looked up to my entire life. Who I trusted. Who I told about you, about how happy you made me. He laughed bitterly. I asked him for advice about proposing. Did he tell you that? 2 weeks ago, I asked him if he thought it was too soon, and you know what he said? Julia's breath caught. Matteo. He said to wait, to make sure we were solid first, to give it more time. Matteo's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Now I know why. The words landed like blows. Julia hadn't known, hadn't realized how deep Matteo's feelings went, how serious his intentions had been. The guilt was suffocating. I need you to leave, Matteo said suddenly, his voice flat. Right now. I can't look at you right now. Julia nodded, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, you're a good man, Matteo. You're going to find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. I'm sorry I wasn't that person. Yeah, he said, not looking at her. Me too. Julia let herself out into the hallway, into the cold December night, and the moment the door closed behind her, she collapsed against the wall. Sobs tore through her chest, ugly and raw. She'd known it would hurt, known she'd hurt him. But knowing and experiencing were two different things. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Dominico. How did it go? Julia stared at the message through tears. How did it go? She'd just broken the heart of a good man who'd done nothing wrong except fall for someone who couldn't love him back. She'd detonated a family with her choices. She'd proven every fear she'd had about this situation was justified. And yet, sitting in her car, watching snow fall on Brooklyn, thinking about Dominico waiting for her answer, Julia felt something alongside the guilt and grief. Relief. Terrible selfish relief that she didn't have to pretend anymore. That she could finally admit what she wanted, even if wanting it made her a bad person. She typed back, "It's done. He knows about us." The response came within seconds. "Where are you?" "Sitting in my car outside his apartment." "Send me your location. I'm coming to get you." "Dom, I don't think—" "Send it, Julia. Please." She did. Then she sat in the darkness, snow accumulating on her windshield, and waited for the man who'd turned her entire life upside down. The man who was supposed to be wrong, impossible, a mistake. The man who felt more right than anything ever had. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up behind her car. Domenico got out, not bothering with a coat despite the cold, and walked to her driver's side window. Giulia rolled it down, and even in the dim streetlight, she could see the concern etched on his face. "Get out of the car," he said quietly. "I'm fine. I just need—" "Giulia." His voice was gentle but firm. "Get out of the car." She did, and the moment she was standing, Domenico pulled her into his arms. The hug was fierce, protective, and Giulia let herself collapse into it. She pressed her face against his chest and cried, really cried, while he held her steady against the storm. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry you had to do that." "He knew," Giulia said against his shirt. "The moment I hesitated, he knew it was you." Domenico's arms tightened. "What did he say?" "That he saw it the first night. That he asked you about proposing." She pulled back to look up at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't my place, and because I hoped maybe I was wrong. Maybe what we felt wasn't real, and you'd be happy with him, and this would all just fade away." His dark eyes searched her face. "I should have been stronger, should have stayed away from you completely." "Would it have mattered?" Giulia asked. "Would staying away have changed how I felt?" "No," Domenico admitted. "But at least then I could have told myself I tried." They stood there in the falling snow, wrapped in each other, the weight of what they'd done settling between them. "What happens now?" Giulia finally asked. Domenico's expression was grim. "Now I go talk to my brother. Face what I've done. Take whatever anger he needs to throw at me. He's not going to forgive you." "I know." There was acceptance in his voice, but also pain. "But I have to try. He deserves that much." Giulia nodded, understanding even as her heart broke for both of them. Matteo deserved the truth, deserved an explanation, deserved to rage at the brother who'd betrayed him. "I'll call you after," Domenico said, pulling back. "Go home, Giulia. Get some rest. This isn't over. But tonight you need to take care of yourself." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she'd wait, that they should face this together. But Domenico was right. This conversation needed to happen between brothers, without her there to complicate it further. Giulia watched him walk back to his SUV, watched him drive away toward what was undoubtedly going to be one of the worst conversations of his life, and felt the full weight of what they'd chosen crash over her. This was real now. Not stolen moments and secret texts, real, messy, complicated, with real consequences for real people who didn't deserve to be hurt. And there was no taking it back. Domenico sat in his SUV outside Matteo's building for 10 minutes before he could force himself to go inside. He'd faced down armed rivals, negotiated with men who thought nothing of violence, made decisions that kept his family safe at tremendous personal cost. But walking up those stairs to confront his brother felt harder than any of it. The door opened before he could knock. Matteo stood there, his face a mask of cold fury that Domenico had never seen directed at him before. "I wondered how long it would take you," Matteo said, stepping aside. "Come to explain, apologize, justify?" Domenico walked into the apartment, his chest tight. "All of the above. None of the above. I don't know what I can say that will make this better." "There's nothing." Matteo closed the door with controlled precision. "Nothing you can say will make this better, Nico. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "I know." "Do you?" Matteo's voice rose. "Do you really? Because from where I'm standing, you took something that wasn't yours. Again." The word again hung in the air like an accusation. Domenico felt its weight settle into his bones. "What does that mean?" "It means this is what you do." Matteo moved to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a whiskey with shaking hands. "You take over. You decide what's best for everyone. You make the choices, and the rest of us just live with the consequences." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Matteo laughed, the sound bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you took over the business and never asked if anyone else wanted a say? Was it fair when you restructured everything without consulting anyone? When you made decisions that affected all of us but only trusted yourself to make them?" "I was 19 years old trying to keep our family from falling apart," Domenico said, his own anger starting to surface. I did what needed to be done. And we've all been grateful. Grateful enough to let you run everything, control everything, decide everything. Matteo downed his whiskey in one swallow. But Julia wasn't yours to decide about. She was mine. And you took her anyway. I didn't take her. She made her own choice. After you pursued her, after you texted her, after you met her in secret. Matteo slammed the glass down. Don't pretend you're some passive victim in this, Nico. You wanted her, so you went after her. Just like you go after everything you want. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Matteo's voice cracked. Explain to me how my brother, the person I've looked up to my entire life, ended up stealing my girlfriend. Domenico ran a hand through his hair, searching for words that would somehow make sense of the senseless. The moment I saw her, something changed. I can't explain it better than that. It was like recognition, like I'd been waiting for her without knowing I was waiting. That's supposed to make me feel better? That it was destiny or fate or some romantic bullshit? Matteo's laugh was harsh. You know what I felt when I saw her? The same thing. And you know what I did? I respected that she was a person, not a feeling. I took my time. I let her get to know me. I didn't just decide she was mine and take her. I didn't decide anything. I fought it, Matteo. I tried to stay away. Not hard enough. The words were cold, final. Not nearly hard enough. Domenico couldn't argue with that. He'd tried, yes, but not with everything he had, because from that first moment, some part of him had already known how this would end. I'm sorry, he said, the words inadequate but sincere. I'm sorrier than you can possibly understand. If I could go back, if I could change. But you can't, Matteo cut him off. And even if you could, would you? Really? Would you give her up? The question was a trap, but an honest one. Domenico looked at his brother, his little brother, who he'd protected and provided for and loved unconditionally, and knew he couldn't lie. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't. Matteo's face went pale. Get out. Matteo, get out of my apartment, Nico. Now. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Matteo's control finally shattered completely. You chose her over me. Over your own brother. Over 13 years of me looking up to you, trusting you, believing you had my back. His voice broke. I asked you about proposing to her. I told you I was falling in love, and you said nothing. You let me sit there and talk about my future with her while you were planning to take that future away. I didn't know what to say, Domenico said, his own voice rough with emotion. I was trying to figure out how to stop feeling what I felt. I thought if I gave it time, if I stayed away, but you didn't stay away. You texted her. You met her. You built something with her while I was building something too. Matteo's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Did you laugh about it? About how stupid I was, falling for someone who was already falling for you? Never. Domenico took a step forward. I have never, will never think of you that way. This destroyed me too, Matteo. Watching you with her, knowing what I felt, knowing I was about to hurt you. But you did it anyway. Matteo's voice was flat now, all the emotion drained out. That's what I can't get past. You knew it would hurt me, and you did it anyway. Because what you wanted was more important than what I needed. The accusation hit harder because it was true. Domenico had chosen, had weighed his feelings against his brothers and chosen himself. For the first time in 13 years, he'd put what he wanted ahead of family duty. You're right, he said. You're absolutely right. I chose myself over you. I chose what I wanted over protecting you. And I can't take that back. All I can do is tell you that I'm sorry, and that I never wanted to hurt you, and that despite everything, I do love you. Don't. Matteo held up a hand. Don't tell me you love me while you're taking the woman I love. Don't insult me like that. She doesn't love you, Matteo. The words were brutal but necessary. I know that doesn't help. I know it makes this worse, but she doesn't love you, and eventually you would have figured that out. Whether it was me or not, this wasn't going to work. You don't know that. I do. Because if she loved you, nothing I said or did would have mattered. She would have shut me down immediately. She would have told you. She would have chosen you. Domenico's voice gentled slightly. But she didn't. Not because you're not good enough, but because sometimes the heart wants what it wants, regardless of logic or fairness or what should be. And her heart wants you. Matteo's voice was hollow. My brother. Of all the people in the world, her heart chose you. I don't understand it either, but you're not giving her up. No. Domenico met his brother's eyes steadily. I'm not. And if that makes me selfish, if that makes me the villain in this story, I'll accept that, but I won't lie to you about it. Matteo was quiet for a long moment, studying Domenico's face like he was seeing him for the first time. You've changed, he said finally, or maybe you haven't. Maybe this is who you've always been, and I just didn't want to see it. What does that mean? It means you've always taken what you wanted. Dad died. You took over the business without asking if anyone else might want to run it. The company was struggling. You restructured without consulting anyone. We needed money. You found it without telling us how. Matteo's eyes were hard. You decide, you act, and everyone else just has to deal with the fallout. Giulia's just the latest example. That's not fair. Everything I did was to protect this family. Was it? Or was it because you like being in control, because you like being the one who makes the hard choices, who carries the weight, who gets to be the martyr? Matteo's voice turned sharp. You wear responsibility like armor, Nico, like it makes you untouchable, but it just makes you alone. The words hit deeper than Domenico expected. He opened his mouth to argue, but Matteo wasn't finished. Do you even know how to let someone in? How to share your life with another person without controlling every aspect of it? Matteo asked. Because Giulia's not a business problem you can solve. She's not a threat you can neutralize. She's a person who's going to want partnership, not protection. Are you capable of that? I don't know, Domenico admitted. But I'm willing to try. Then I hope you're ready for it to be harder than anything you've ever done. Matteo's expression was cold. Because Giulia deserves someone who can actually be with her, not someone who's just good at making decisions alone. Is that it then? Your blessing? No. It's not my blessing, it's my warning. Matteo moved to the door, opened it. You're going to hurt her, Nico. Maybe not intentionally, but you will, because you don't know how to be vulnerable, and that's what real relationships require. And when you do, when she realizes that you're more comfortable giving orders than taking input, I hope you remember this conversation. Domenico wanted to argue, to defend himself, but looking at his brother's face, seeing the pain and anger and disappointment there, he couldn't find the words. I need you to leave, Matteo said quietly, and I need you to not come back for a while. I can't see you right now. Maybe not for a long time. The family will survive without you for a few weeks. They survived before you took over. They'll survive now. Matteo's voice was steady but final. Tell Ma I'm fine. Tell her I need some space. But don't tell her why. Let her think it's work stress or something. She doesn't need to know her sons are broken. We're not broken, aren't we? Matteo's smile was sad. You betrayed me, Nico. Took the one thing I asked you to respect. That breaks something. Maybe it'll heal eventually. Maybe we'll figure out how to be brothers again. But right now, we're broken. Domenico stood in the doorway, wanting to fix this, wanting to find the words that would make his brother understand. But there were no such words. He'd made his choice, and this was the consequence. I'm sorry, he said one more time. For what it's worth. It's worth something, Matteo said, just not enough. The door closed quietly, but the finality of it echoed like a gunshot. Domenico stood in the hallway for a full minute, staring at the wood, before he could make himself walk away. In his SUV, he sat with his forehead against the steering wheel and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. Matteo was right about so much, about control, about decisions, about the way Domenico had structured his entire life around being the one who carried everything alone. His phone buzzed. A text from Giulia. Are you okay? He typed back, driving to you now. Are you home? Yes? 20 minutes later, Domenico stood outside Giulia's apartment building, staring up at her second-floor windows. This was it, the point of no return. He could turn around now, walk away, let Giulia rebuild her life without the complication he brought with him. Let her find someone simpler, easier, someone who didn't come with family baggage and a brother's broken heart. But even as the thought formed, he knew he couldn't. Whatever was between them was too strong to walk away from, even if walking away was the right thing to do. Julia answered her buzzer immediately, and when he reached her door, she was already waiting. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. But when she saw him, relief flooded her face. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Calm, organized, filled with plants and soft textures. A sanctuary. The kind of space someone built when they needed control over their environment because the world outside was chaos. He understood that instinct intimately. "How bad was it?" Julia asked, closing the door behind him. "Bad." Domenico ran a hand through his hair. "He knows. He's angry. He asked me not to come around for a while." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. This is on me. I made the choice to pursue you." He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the way she stood with her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding herself together. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." Julia's voice was small. "I keep waiting to feel like I made the right choice, but all I feel is guilty." "Guilt's fair. We hurt someone who didn't deserve it." "Do you regret it?" The question was quiet but critical. "Be honest. Do you regret choosing this? Choosing me?" Domenico crossed the space between them, cupped her face in his hands, and looked directly into her green eyes. "No. And that probably makes me a terrible person, but no. I don't regret choosing you." Julia's breath caught. Then she was kissing him, and Domenico forgot everything else. Forgot Matteo's anger, forgot the family complications, forgot every reason this was a bad idea. There was only Julia, finally in his arms, kissing him like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Domenico rested his forehead against hers. "This is going to be complicated," he said. "I know. My family's going to take sides. Some will understand, some won't. My mother's going to be disappointed in me." "I know. And Matteo," Domenico's voice caught, "Matteo may never forgive me." "I know that too." Julia's hands came up to cover his where they still cupped her face. "But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. And I'm tired of fighting it." "What do you feel?" The question was vulnerable in a way Domenico rarely allowed himself to be. "Like I've been looking for you my whole life without knowing it," Julia said simply. "Like everything before this was just waiting. Like you're the reason I couldn't fall in love with Matteo, even though he was everything that should have been right." "That's how I feel too," Domenico admitted, "from the moment I saw you, like recognition." "So what do we do now?" "Now?" Domenico pulled back slightly, searching her face. "Now we try. We figure out what this is. We deal with the fallout. We see if what we feel is strong enough to survive reality. And if it's not, then at least we'll know." But even as he said it, Domenico knew. This thing between them wasn't going to fade, wasn't going to collapse under pressure. It was too fundamental, too elemental. They moved to her couch, and Julia curled into his side like she belonged there. For hours they talked, really talked. Domenico found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about the weight of taking over at 19, about the loneliness of being the one who always had to be strong, about the choices he'd made that still haunted him. And Julia shared too. About growing up in silence, about building a business from nothing, about the fear that she'd never feel genuine connection with anyone because she was too contained, too controlled. "We're both control freaks," Domenico observed, his arm around her shoulders. "Terrified of vulnerability," Julia added. "This is going to be a disaster." "Probably." But she was smiling. Domenico's phone rang around midnight. His mother's name flashed on the screen, and dread filled his stomach. "I have to take this," he said. Julia nodded, pulling away to give him space. Domenico answered, already knowing what was coming. "Domenico Vitali, you tell me right now that what Matteo just told me isn't true." Rosa's voice was sharp with anger and hurt. "Tell me you did not pursue your brother's girlfriend. Don't ma me. Did you or didn't you?" There was no point in lying. "I did." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, "How could you? How could you do this to your brother, to this family?" It's not that simple." "It seems very simple to me." Matteo brought home a nice girl. You decided you wanted her, you took her. Rosa's voice cracked. I didn't raise you to be selfish, Nico. I know this looks bad, but Ma, you have to understand. I understand that your brother is devastated. I understand that you broke his trust. What else is there to understand? Domenico looked at Giulia, who was watching him with worried eyes. I'm in love with her. The words fell into silence. He'd never said them out loud before, not to Giulia, not to anyone. But hearing his mother's disappointment, feeling the weight of what he'd done, the truth had come out. Love, Rosa repeated, her voice flat. You're in love with her, and that's supposed to make it okay, supposed to make hurting Matteo acceptable? No. Nothing makes hurting him okay. But it explains why I couldn't walk away. You could have walked away. You chose not to. Rosa sighed, and in it Domenico heard years of weariness. I don't know who you are right now. The son I raised would never have done this. Ma, I need time, Domenico. Time to process this. Time to talk to Matteo. Time to figure out what this means for our family. She paused. Don't come to Sunday dinner this week. Give everyone space. Okay. And Nico? Her voice softened slightly. I hope she's worth it. I hope whatever you feel for this girl is worth breaking your brother's heart. Because if it's not, if this is just some infatuation that burns out in a few months, you'll have destroyed your relationship with Matteo for nothing. It's not an infatuation. Then you better be prepared to fight for it, because this family is not going to make this easy on you. Rosa hung up without saying goodbye. Domenico set down his phone, feeling hollowed out. Giulia immediately moved back to his side. She's angry, he said unnecessarily. She has every right to be. She told me not to come to Sunday dinner. Giulia flinched. I'm sorry. This is my fault too. No. Domenico turned to her. This is both of us. We made this choice together. We deal with the consequences together. Your family will either accept this or they won't. But I'm not hiding you, Giulia. I'm not pretending this isn't real. His voice was firm. I meant what I said. I'm in love with you. Giulia's eyes widened. You said that to your mother. I know. Probably should have said it to you first. He managed a small smile. But it's true. I love you. I don't know how or why it happened so fast, but it did. I love you too, Giulia whispered, and that terrifies me, because we barely know each other, and this is all so complicated, and everyone's going to hate us, but I can't deny what I feel. Then don't. Domenico pulled her close. We'll figure the rest out. But even as he said it, even as he held her, Domenico's mind was racing. His mother's words echoed, his brother's anger burned. The family he'd spent 13 years protecting was fracturing because of him. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a darker worry began to form. Because Domenico's life wasn't simple. The business he ran, the choices he made, the world he operated in, it wasn't safe. It wasn't clean. And bringing Giulia into it meant exposing her to dangers she couldn't possibly understand yet. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, he just held her and tried to believe that love could be enough to weather what was coming. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from his lieutenant Marco. We have a problem. The Castellanos are asking questions about your personal life. Thought you should know. Domenico's blood ran cold. He'd been so focused on the family drama that he'd failed to consider how his enemies might perceive a weakness. And Giulia was absolutely a weakness now. What's wrong? Giulia asked, feeling him tense. Nothing. Work thing. He forced himself to relax. I should go. Let you get some sleep. You could stay. The offer was tentative. If you want. Domenico wanted to spend the night holding her, proving to himself this was real. But the text from Marco changed things. Until he understood the Castellano situation, until he knew Giulia was safe, he couldn't afford distractions. Rain check? He said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I have an early meeting. Okay. Giulia walked him to the door. Dom, we're going to be okay, right? All of this, the family, the complications, we'll get through it? He should have been honest. Should have told her about the text, about the danger, about the fact that loving him came with risks she couldn't imagine. But looking at her face, seeing the hope and fear there, he couldn't bring himself to add more weight. We'll be fine, he lied. I promise. The kiss goodbye was sweet and lingering, and as Domenico drove away, checking his mirrors more carefully than usual, he made himself a promise. He would protect Giulia. Whatever it took, whoever he had to deal with, he would keep her safe. Even if it meant stepping back into the darkness he'd been trying to leave behind. Even if it meant becoming the man his brother accused him of being. Even if it cost him everything. The black sedan appeared 3 days later. Giulia first noticed it Tuesday morning, parked across from her yoga studio with tinted windows that reflected the weak December sunlight. She dismissed it as paranoia, the guilt over Matteo and the family drama making her jumpy. But when she left that evening, it was still there. And when she walked to her favorite coffee shop Wednesday afternoon, a different sedan followed her for 6 blocks before turning off. By Thursday, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "Dom, I think someone's watching me," she said when he called that evening. The silence on the other end was too long. "What do you mean watching you? There's been a car outside my studio, and I keep seeing the same man at the coffee shop near my apartment. Dark hair, leather jacket, always on his phone but never really looking at it." Giulia wrapped her free arm around herself. "Am I being paranoid?" "No." Domenico's voice was tight. "You're not. Where are you right now?" "My apartment. I just got home." "Lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone except me. I'm coming over." "Dom, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." He hung up before she could respond. 15 minutes later, Domenico arrived with 2 other men. One was older, built like a brick wall with salt and pepper hair. The other was younger, lean and watchful, with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "This is Marco," Domenico said, indicating the older man. "And Tommy. They work with me." "Doing what exactly?" Giulia looked between them. "Because normal import-export companies don't send security details to their employees' girlfriends. We're not talking about this here." Domenico moved to her windows, peering through the blinds. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me." "Excuse me?" "Giulia." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his expression made her breath catch. "I need you to trust me right now. Pack enough for a few days. Clothes, toiletries, whatever you need. We're leaving in 10 minutes. I have classes tomorrow, students who are counting on me." "Cancel them." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can." Domenico crossed to her, took her shoulders gently but firmly. "The Castellano family knows about you. They know you matter to me. And they're watching you because they want to understand if you're leverage they can use." The words penetrated slowly. "Leverage? Dom, what are you talking about? Who are the Castellanos?" "Rivals, people I've had dealings with, people who would be very interested in anything that makes me vulnerable." His jaw tightened. "I should have seen this coming. Should have been more careful. But I was so focused on the family drama that I didn't consider—" He stopped himself. "Pack. Please. We'll talk once you're somewhere safe." Giulia wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers immediately. But the fear in Domenico's eyes was real, and the 2 men standing in her living room looked like they knew exactly how to handle violence. She packed. 20 minutes later, she was in Domenico's SUV, Marco and Tommy following in a separate car. They drove north out of the city, into Westchester County, the buildings giving way to trees and sprawling estates hidden behind stone walls. "Where are we going?" Giulia asked. "A property I own, secure, private. No one knows about it except a handful of people." Domenico's hands were tight on the steering wheel. "We'll be safe there while I figure out how to handle this." "Handle what?" "Dom, you need to tell me what's going on. What kind of business are you actually in?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "My father's import-export company was legitimate, mostly, but there were side ventures, arrangements with families who controlled various territories. After he died, I inherited those arrangements along with the legitimate business." "Families," Giulia repeated. "You mean crime families?" "Yes." The single word hung in the air. Giulia processed it slowly, pieces clicking into place. The way people reacted to Domenico, the security, the late-night meetings, the careful control he maintained over every aspect of his life. "You're in the mafia," she said flatly. "I manage relationships with organized crime families. It's more complicated than that, but essentially, yes." Domenico glanced at her. "I've spent years trying to transition the business to fully legitimate operations. But you don't just walk away from these things. There are obligations, debts, arrangements that can't be easily unwound. And the Castellanos? We've had a territorial dispute for the past year. Shipping routes, warehouse access, the usual conflicts. We've been negotiating, trying to find common ground. But they're old school. They see kindness as weakness, negotiation as surrender. He took a sharp turn onto a private road. And now they know about you, which means they know I have something to lose. Julia's mind was reeling. This was insane. She taught yoga. She drank green smoothies and meditated and believed in finding inner peace. And somehow she'd fallen in love with a man who negotiated with crime families. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. "Because I was hoping I could keep you separate from that part of my life. That I could be just Dom with you, not the person I have to be for the business." His voice was rough with regret. "I was naive, and now you're in danger because of it." They pulled up to a beautiful colonial house set back from the road, surrounded by mature trees and a high fence. Domenico parked in the circular drive, and Marco immediately began checking the perimeter while Tommy secured the entrance. Inside, the house was tastefully furnished but impersonal, like a high-end rental. Domenico led Julia to a spacious bedroom upstairs, set her bag on the bed. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll talk more in the morning." "I'm not tired. I'm terrified and confused and—" Julia's voice broke. "What have I gotten myself into?" Domenico pulled her into his arms, and despite everything, she let herself sink into the embrace. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. All of it. I should have stayed away from you, should have protected you by keeping my distance." "Would that have worked?" Julia pulled back to look at him. "Because even knowing all this, even scared out of my mind, I don't wish we'd never met." "You should." But his arms tightened around her. "You should run as far from me as possible." "Probably." Julia managed a shaky laugh. "But I'm apparently terrible at self-preservation." They stood there holding each other until Marco knocked on the door. "Boss, we need to talk." Domenico kissed Julia's forehead before stepping into the hall. She could hear low voices, tense discussion. When he returned, his expression was grim. "The Castellanos made contact. They want a meeting." "That's good, right? You can negotiate?" "Maybe. Or it's a trap." Domenico ran a hand through his hair. "Either way, I have to go. Marco will stay here with you. Tommy and I will handle the meeting." "When?" "Tomorrow night." He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "Julia, if this goes wrong, don't." She sat beside him. "Don't do the dramatic goodbye speech. You're going to go to this meeting, you're going to negotiate like the brilliant strategist you obviously are, and you're going to come back. That's what's going to happen. You have a lot of faith in me." "I do. Even though you're apparently a crime lord." "Not a crime lord, more like a reluctant intermediary who got stuck in a position I never wanted." His voice was bitter. "My father built something I didn't ask for. And when he died, the only way to keep the family safe was to take it over. Every choice I've made since has been about protecting them from the reality of what he left behind." "Does your family know? About the crime connections?" "My mother suspects but doesn't ask. Matteo thinks it's all legitimate." Domenico's expression darkened. "One more thing I've kept from him. One more way I've controlled everything without trusting anyone else to handle it." Julia thought about Matteo's accusation during their fight, about how Domenico always took control, always made the decisions alone. This was what he'd been protecting everyone from. The truth about what their father had built, what Domenico had inherited. "Have you ever considered just telling them?" she asked quietly. "And what? Shatter their illusions? Let them see that the business supporting them isn't as clean as they think?" Domenico shook his head. "No. That burden is mine to carry. That's very noble. Also very lonely. I'm used to lonely." "You don't have to be." Julia took his hand. "I'm here now. And I know I'm probably the last person who should be giving advice about this situation, but maybe carrying everything alone is part of the problem. Maybe if you'd let people in, trusted them to help shoulder the weight, you wouldn't be in this position." Domenico looked at their joined hands. "You sound like Matteo." Maybe he had a point. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything pressing down. Finally, Domenico stood. Try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. But sleep was impossible. Julia lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. She'd broken up with the good man to be with his brother. That brother turned out to have deep connections to organized crime. And now she was in protective custody because a rival family wanted to use her as leverage. This was her life now. And the terrifying part was that despite everything, she still didn't want to leave. The next day crawled by. Marco was professional, but not particularly talkative. Julia tried to work, responding to concerned texts from students about her sudden cancellations, but concentration was impossible. By evening, she was pacing the living room, anxiety making her skin crawl. Domenico left at 7, and the look he gave her before walking out felt like a goodbye she wasn't ready for. Hours passed. 8 became 9. 9 became 10. Julia sat on the couch, Marco positioned by the window, both of them silent and tense. At 11:30, headlights swept across the front of the house. Marco was on his feet immediately, hand moving to something under his jacket. But then Tommy's voice came through the radio. "All clear. We're coming in." Julia nearly collapsed with relief when Domenico walked through the door. He looked exhausted but unharmed, and when he saw her, something in his expression softened. "It's handled," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means I made a deal. The Castellanos get exclusive shipping access to 3 routes they wanted. In exchange, you're off limits. Anyone in my personal life is off limits. It's written, signed, witnessed." Domenico moved to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a bourbon. "It cost me, but you're safe." "Just like that?" They agreed. "Not just like that. I had to give up strategic advantages. Had to agree to terms I wouldn't have otherwise accepted." He downed the bourbon in one swallow. "But yes, they agreed." Julia crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. She felt him tense, then gradually relax into her embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his back. "Don't thank me. This is my fault. My world put you in danger. Your world also kept me safe." Julia moved around to face him. "You could have walked away, told them I didn't matter, protected your business interests. But you didn't." "I couldn't." Domenico cupped her face. "Julia, I need you to understand something. This won't be the last time. My life is complicated, dangerous. There will always be rivals, always be negotiations, always be the possibility of violence. If you stay with me, that's what you're signing up for." "Are you trying to scare me away?" "I'm trying to be honest. For once in my life, I'm trying to be completely honest with someone about who I am and what my life looks like." His dark eyes searched hers. "You deserve someone safe, someone simple, someone who doesn't have to make deals with criminals to keep you protected." "What if I don't want safe and simple?" Julia's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "What if I want complicated and real in you? Then you're braver than I gave you credit for. Or more foolish. That too." But he was smiling slightly. "We should go back to the city. You have a life to get back to. Students who need you." "What about your family? Your mother told you not to come to Sunday dinner." Domenico's smile faded. "That's a different problem. One I'm not sure how to solve." They drove back Saturday morning, the winter landscape bleak and beautiful outside the windows. At Julia's apartment, Domenico checked every room, every window, his professional side taking over. Satisfied it was secure, he finally relaxed. "I should go," he said, though he didn't move toward the door. "Let you settle back in. Or you could stay." Julia stepped closer. "We haven't really had a chance to just be together. Not with all the drama and danger and complications." "Is that what you want? Just to be together?" "Yes." So he stayed, and for the rest of the weekend they existed in a bubble where the outside world didn't matter. They talked for hours, learning each other in ways they hadn't had time for before. Julia told him about the business she'd built from nothing, about the satisfaction of helping people find peace in their bodies. Domenico shared more about the burden of taking over at 19, about the choices that still haunted him. Sunday afternoon, Julia's phone rang. Angela's name appeared on the screen. "I should answer this," Julia said. "She's been texting all week." "Go ahead." Julia stepped into the bedroom for privacy. "Angela, hi." "Don't hi me. What the hell happened? Matteo won't talk about it. Rosa's been crying, and Nico's apparently disappeared off the face of the earth." Angela's voice was sharp with concern. And you've been radio silent for a week, so talk, now. Julia took a breath. It's complicated. I gathered that. Start explaining. So Julia did. Not everything, not the danger or the crime families, but the basic truth. That she'd developed feelings for Dominico, that she'd ended things with Matteo, that the family was understandably angry. Angela was quiet for a long moment. Then, are you in love with him? With Nico? Yes. And he feels the same? He says he does. Another pause. Okay, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to listen. Nico has spent 13 years sacrificing everything for this family. Everything. He gave up college, gave up any chance at a normal life, gave up personal happiness, all to keep us afloat. Angela's voice softened. And in all that time, I've never seen him want anything for himself. Until you. That doesn't make it okay that we hurt Matteo. No, it doesn't. Matteo's pain is real, and he has every right to be angry. But Julia, if Nico chose you, if he was willing to risk his relationship with his brother for you, then what you have must be real. Because he doesn't do anything impulsively. Your mother is hurt because her sons are fighting, but she'll come around. Rosa loves Nico too much to lose him forever. It'll just take time. Angela sighed. Look, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. Family dinners are going to be awkward as hell. But if you and Nico are serious about each other, the family will adapt. We always do. I don't want to cause a permanent rift. Then don't. Show up. Face it. Let everyone see that this isn't just some fling that's going to burn out in a month. Angela's voice turned firm. Come to Sunday dinner next week. Both of you. I don't think that's a good idea. I didn't ask if you thought it was a good idea. I'm telling you what needs to happen. You and Nico need to face the family together. Let them see what you are to each other. Let Matteo see that you're not going anywhere. Julia's stomach churned at the thought. What if it makes things worse? Then it makes things worse. But hiding isn't going to fix anything. Angela paused. And Julia? Matteo's stronger than you think. He's hurt, but he's not broken. Give him credit for being able to handle the truth. After they hung up, Julia returned to the living room where Domenico was reading on her couch, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Angela thinks we should go to Sunday dinner next week, she said. Domenico looked up. That's a terrible idea. That's what I said, but she thinks we need to face the family, show them this is real. It is real. They don't need proof. Don't they? Julia sat beside him. Dom, you said yourself that you've spent 13 years sacrificing for them. Maybe it's time to show them that you're allowed to want something for yourself. Even if what I want hurt one of them? Especially then. Because if you keep hiding, keep avoiding, they'll never have the chance to accept this, accept us. Domenico was quiet, considering. Finally, he nodded. Okay, we'll go. Together. The week that followed was tense. Domenico returned to work, dealing with the fallout from his agreement with the Castellanos. Julia returned to her studio, reassuring worried students and trying to rebuild her routine. They talked every night, sometimes for hours, and slowly the relationship that had started with stolen moments became something more substantial. But Sunday loomed like a storm cloud. When the day arrived, Julia changed outfits 3 times before Domenico picked her up. He looked as tense as she felt, his jaw tight as they drove to Brooklyn. We can still turn around, he said as they pulled up to Rosa's house. No, we can't. Julia squeezed his hand. Whatever happens in there, we face it together. The door opened before they could knock. Rosa stood there, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she just looked at them. Then she stepped aside. Come in. The dining room fell silent when they entered. The usual chaos of the Vitali Sunday dinner died as everyone turned to stare. Julia saw Uncle Carmine, Angela, various cousins, and at the far end of the table, Matteo. He looked thinner than he had 2 weeks ago. Tired. But when his eyes met Julia's, there was something in them besides anger, something that looked almost like resignation. Well, Rosa said, her voice cutting through the silence, I suppose we should address the elephant in the room. Domenico, You want to explain to your family why you're bringing your brother's ex-girlfriend to Sunday dinner? She's not just my ex-girlfriend, Domenico said, his voice steady. She's the woman I'm in love with, and I'm not apologizing for that. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, shock and judgment and curiosity all mixing together. Rosa held up her hand for silence. You hurt your brother, she said to Domenico. Deeply. For that, you should apologize. I know, and I am sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for loving Giulia. Domenico's hand tightened on hers. Matteo deserves better than someone who could never love him the way he deserved, and I deserve a chance at happiness, even if the timing was terrible. The timing wasn't the only problem, Matteo said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, controlled. You went behind my back. You pursued her while we were together. You lied. You're right. I did all of those things. Domenico met his brother's eyes. And I can't take them back, can't undo the hurt. All I can do is tell you that I'm sorry, and that I hope someday you'll be able to forgive me. Forgive you? Matteo laughed bitterly. Nico, I don't even know if I can look at you right now without wanting to... He stopped, shook his head. But I also can't keep carrying this anger. It's exhausting. So what does that mean? Rosa asked. It means I'm not ready to forgive. Not yet, but I also can't keep fighting. Matteo looked at Giulia. You love him? Really love him? Yes, Giulia said quietly. I do. And you? Matteo turned to Domenico. You're willing to lose your relationship with me for her. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep her in my life, but I'm hoping I don't have to choose between you and her. Domenico's voice was raw. You're my brother, Matteo. That doesn't change just because this situation is complicated. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I saw it that first night, the way you looked at each other. I told myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. He took a breath. Maybe this was always going to happen. Maybe you two were always meant to find each other, and I was just in the way. You weren't in the way, Giulia said. You are a good man who deserved better than what I could give you. And I'm sorry I didn't realize that sooner. Yeah, well, I'm sorry too. Sorry I didn't see it coming. Sorry I let myself fall for someone whose heart was already spoken for. Matteo stood. But I'm done being the victim in this story. So here's what's going to happen. You two are going to date or get married or whatever, and I'm going to move on with my life. We're going to be civil at family functions. Maybe eventually we'll even be okay again. But right now, I need space. That's fair, Domenico said. More than fair, Matteo corrected. It's generous, because part of me wants to tell you both to go to hell. But you're still my brother, Nico, and family is family, even when they screw up spectacularly. Rosa moved to Matteo's side, pulled him into a hug. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Then she turned to Domenico and Giulia. And you two. You've caused chaos in this family, hurt people, made everything complicated. I know, Domenico said. And I'm not finished. Rosa's voice was sharp. You've caused chaos, but you've also shown me that my son is capable of putting himself first. After 13 years of watching him sacrifice everything for everyone else, it's about time. Her expression softened slightly. I don't like how this happened. Don't like that Matteo got hurt. But if you're serious about Giulia, if this is real and lasting, then I suppose we'll have to make room for it. It's real, Domenico said. I promise you, Ma, it's real. Then I have one condition. Rosa looked between them. You come to Sunday dinner every week, both of you, because this family doesn't do secrets and hiding. If you're together, you're part of us. And that means showing up, even when it's uncomfortable. We can do that, Giulia said, finding her voice. Good. Rosa moved to the table, started arranging plates. Now sit down and eat. The pasta's getting cold, and I didn't spend all morning cooking for it to go to waste. The dinner that followed was awkward. Conversation stilted. But slowly, gradually, the family's natural warmth began to thaw the ice. Angela asked Giulia about her studio. Uncle Carmine launched into a story that had nothing to do with anything. Children ran around, oblivious to the adult drama. And Matteo, though he barely spoke, stayed. He didn't leave, didn't storm out. He stayed and ate his mother's cooking and let himself be part of the family, even with the people who'd hurt him sitting at the same table. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. As they were leaving, Matteo stopped them at the door. "Nico, can I talk to you? Alone?" Domenico nodded, and Giulia stepped outside to give them privacy. The brothers stood in the hallway, the weight of everything between them. "I meant what I said," Matteo started. "I need time, space, but I also need you to know something." "What?" "You were right about Giulia not loving me. I knew it too, even though I didn't want to admit it." Matteo's voice was steady. "I thought if I was patient enough, good enough, she'd eventually feel what I felt. But you can't force that. And watching her with you today, seeing the way she looks at you, I never had that. Never would have had that. That doesn't make it hurt less." "No, it doesn't. But it does mean that maybe this was always going to end. You just accelerated the timeline." Matteo paused. "And for what it's worth, I do want you to be happy. Eventually. When I'm less angry. I can live with eventually." "Good. Because that's all I can offer right now." Matteo extended his hand. "Take care of her, Nico. She chose you. Don't make her regret it." Domenico shook his brother's hand, feeling the weight of everything in that single gesture. "I won't." Outside, Giulia waited by the car. When Domenico joined her, she searched his face. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think we're going to be okay. All of us. Eventually." They drove back to Manhattan in comfortable silence. At Giulia's apartment, Domenico walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said, "for being willing to face that, for standing beside me." "That's what partners do," Giulia said simply. "They face things together." "Partners." Domenico tested the word. "I like that." "Me too." Giulia kissed him softly. "So what happens now? We just date? Build a normal relationship?" "I don't think anything about us is going to be normal." But he was smiling. "But yeah, we date. We figure out how to balance your world and mine. We show my family that we're serious. We let Matteo heal. We take it one day at a time." "One day at a time," Giulia echoed. "I can do that." 6 months later, Giulia stood in her expanded yoga studio, watching the sunset paint Brooklyn in shades of gold and pink. The business had grown significantly, partly because she'd finally accepted help. Domenico had insisted on investing, on hiring staff, on giving her the space to focus on teaching rather than managing every detail alone. They'd found their rhythm. Dinners at Domenico's penthouse, weekends at the Westchester property that no longer felt like a safe house but like a retreat. Sunday dinners with the family where Matteo was slowly, gradually becoming okay with their presence. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult moments, still tension at family gatherings, but there was also acceptance. Rosa had indeed come around, fussing over Giulia like she was already a daughter-in-law. Angela had become a genuine friend. Even Uncle Carmine had started including them both in his rambling stories. And Matteo, though he'd started dating someone new, a lawyer named Sophie, who made him laugh, had found his way to civility. He and Domenico were rebuilding their relationship, slowly, one careful conversation at a time. The studio door opened and Domenico walked in, still in his work clothes. "Ready to go?" "Where are we going?" Giulia asked, even though she knew. "Sunday dinner, their weekly tradition now." "My mother's. She's making your favorite." He pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But first, I need to ask you something." "What?" Domenico pulled a small box from his pocket, and Giulia's breath caught. "I know it's only been 6 months. I know we've been through hell to get here. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build something real and lasting. I want to be your partner in everything." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Giulia Moretti, will you marry me?" Giulia felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, and when Domenico kissed her, it felt like coming home. Like everything they'd been through, the pain, the complications, the impossible choices, had been leading to this moment. "Your family is going to have opinions," Giulia said when they finally broke apart. "Let them. I'm done living my life for everyone else's approval." But he was smiling. "Though my mother is going to be insufferable about planning the wedding. I can handle Rosa." "Can you handle me?" The question was vulnerable despite the smile. "I think so. As long as you can handle me." Julia took his hand. We're in this together, right? Partners? Partners, Domenico agreed. Through everything. They drove to Brooklyn together, and when they walked into Rosa's house, the family's reaction to the ring was exactly as chaotic as expected. Rosa cried and immediately started planning. Angela demanded to be maid of honor. Uncle Carmine launched into a story about a ring he once lost in a grocery store. And Matteo, after a moment of visible emotion, crossed to them. Congratulations, he said, and meant it. I'm happy for you both. Thank you, Julia said quietly. That means everything. Yeah, well, someone might as well be happy. But Matteo was smiling slightly, and when Sophie arrived a few minutes later, the way his face lit up suggested he'd found his own path to happiness. Dinner was loud and warm, and exactly what Sunday dinners should be. Julia sat beside Domenico, his hand in hers under the table, and felt the weight of their journey settle into something lighter, something that felt like peace. They'd hurt people to get here, made mistakes, chosen the complicated path when easier ones existed. But looking around the table at the family who'd eventually accepted them, at the brother who'd found his way to forgiveness, at the man beside her who'd risked everything for love, Julia knew it had been worth it. Because sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy one. Sometimes it meant facing judgment and anger and consequences. Sometimes it meant fighting for something everyone said was impossible. But when that impossible thing was sitting beside you, holding your hand, looking at you like you were the reason the sun rose, it stopped being impossible. It just became real. And real, Julia had learned, was so much better than perfect. After dinner, as they said their goodbyes, Rosa pulled Julia aside. You take care of my son, she said, her eyes serious. He's been alone for too long. Make him remember how to be happy. I will, Julia promised. And he takes care of me too. We take care of each other. Good. That's how it should be. Rosa hugged her tightly. Welcome to the family, officially. You're stuck with us now. I wouldn't have it any other way. In the car on the way home, Domenico was quiet. Julia watched him drive, noting the relaxation in his shoulders, the slight smile playing at his lips. What are you thinking? She asked. That I'm the luckiest man alive. He glanced at her. And that Matteo was wrong about one thing. What's that? He said I don't know how to let people in, that I'm too used to being alone. Domenico's hand found hers. But you've taught me that partnership isn't about giving up control. It's about choosing to share the weight, about trusting someone else to carry part of what you've been carrying alone. And, Julia prompted, and I'm grateful. For you, for us, for the fact that even though I hurt my brother and complicated everything and nearly lost you to danger, you stayed. His voice was rough with emotion. You stayed and fought for this. For us. Because you're worth fighting for, Julia said simply. We both are. They drove through the city streets, past the places that had shaped their story, the wine bar where they'd first met alone, the diner in Queens where they'd confessed their feelings, Julia's studio, Domenico's office building, all the landmarks of their complicated journey. And as they pulled up to Domenico's penthouse, their penthouse now, Julia felt the last piece of doubt dissolve. This was right. Messy and complicated and born from painful choices, but right. I love you, she said as they rode the elevator up. I love you too, Domenico replied. Thank you for choosing the wrong brother. Julia laughed. You weren't the wrong brother. You were exactly the right one. Just took me a minute to figure it out. Best mistake of your life? Best decision, Julia corrected. The only mistake was not seeing it sooner. Inside the apartment, they stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Domenico wrapped his arms around Julia from behind, and she leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. This was home, not the apartment or the studio or the house in Westchester. Home was this man who'd turned her life upside down and then helped her rebuild it into something better. Home was choosing each other, every day, despite the complications. What are you thinking now? Domenico murmured against her hair. That I'm glad I went to that Sunday dinner, Julia said, even though it terrified me, even though I thought it would be a disaster, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have met you, wouldn't have felt that recognition, wouldn't have known what it feels like to be loved like this. Like what? Like I'm the most important thing in your world. like you'd risk everything to keep me safe, like I'm finally completely home. Domenico turned her in his arms, looked into her eyes with an intensity that still made her breath catch. You are the most important thing in my world, and you are home, for both of us. They kissed as the city glittered around them, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd hurt others to be together, who'd faced judgment and danger and family drama, and who'd emerged stronger for it. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real and complicated and sometimes messy. But it was theirs, and that made it perfect.